Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to the Customer and Community Engagement Breakout. My name is Anna, and I am a Community Engagement Associate at MCE Clean Energy. Today, we're going to discuss how community and customer engagement are a vital piece of pathways to advanced energy community deployment. We have 4 experts today who are going to share their experience and what they've learned from their projects, lessons learned, and answer some questions from the audience. Please hold your questions as we're going to have Q&A at the end. I'm delighted to introduce, we have Alexandra McGee, who is the VP of Strategic Initiatives at MCE. Alexandra is in the business of reimagining how we power the world. Her department pushes innovative, out-of-the-box strategies to move us toward a clean energy economy while catalyzing equitable economic and community benefits. With almost a decade in community choice aggregation movement, she has worked as a translator, community organizer, liaison to municipalities, grant writer, academic author, project manager, and as a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. She has a master's degree from UC Berkeley for her research on community approaches to small-scale, decentralized, renewable energy for rural electrification in Nicaragua.
Quite relevant.
Next, we have Natalie at the end. Natalie Espinosa is the Assistant Director of Marketing, Education, and Outreach. Natalie Espinosa is an environmental justice and community engagement leader with over a decade of experience advancing equitable energy, food access, and sustainable initiatives in underserved communities. At the Energy Coalition, she leads outreach and partnerships with community-based organizations, focusing on community-driven solutions that expand access to resources and opportunities across Southern California and beyond. Next, we have Therese Pepper, who is the Associate Director of the California Institute for Energy and Environment at UC Berkeley. Therese Pepper is a PhD. She's a project manager, researcher, associate director at the California Institute for Energy and Environment, within the Center for Information Technology Research in the Interest of Society at the University of California, Berkeley. Therese manages and conducts research in smart building technologies, building to grid, demand response, smart grid research, projects with the objective of creating comfortable and energy efficient livable spaces. She is currently managing the Energy Commission funded Eco Block Neighborhood Energy Retrofit Project. Last but not least, we have Jim Becker, the CEO of Richmond Community Foundation. Jim Becker joined the Richmond Community Foundation in 2005, becoming its president and CEO in 2014. He brought this experience to the foundation to create the housing renovation program financed by the region's first successful social impact bond. RCF's Housing Brownfields work, combined with its award-winning social impact bond financing tool, has had a significant impact in local communities, and the model is gaining traction in other cities across the country. I now would like to welcome Alexandra McGee to talk about her lessons learned.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. Are we recording? So you need a mic, huh?
I built this.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, all. Thank you for sticking with us. It does feel like a bit of a family reunion, like the vibe, the energy feels really great. So thank you for contributing to that. As Anna mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned through the AEC community engagement process. We've already talked a lot about CCAs, but I did even get an opportunity to mention some of the energy efficiency programs that MCE runs in our communities. Just as a reminder, so MCE was the first CCA in California, but we serve Marin, Napa, Contra Costa, and Solano. So if that's where you live, thank you for being a customer. Nice. Come talk to me if any of these programs sound interesting to you. So as mentioned, there are the energy efficiency programs. Those are CPUC funded dollars. We have been able to disseminate $10 million in rebates, and that includes everything from light bulbs to water heaters to insulation, and really has changed over the years, but it's our longest running program. Over 5,000 customers have received benefits there. Now that's CPUC funded. MCE also, we have our revenue streams because of our customers, and we have some flexibility in how those get spent. We are a not-for-profit public agency. We reinvest many of those dollars back into additional programs, including our electric vehicle program. So that could be, let's say you go to the dealership and you don't really know how to navigate all the different paperwork. Well, you're in luck because at the dealership, you can get an MCE rebate. They layer it directly onto the cost of the vehicle. It might be you're buying a car, could be you're buying or leasing a car. You can access these rebates directly there. But then what do? Where do you charge? And so we have an electric vehicle charging program as well that targets daytime charging. So that is where we are hoping to generate some more power during the day where we're having a lot of solar. We want to be able to absorb as much of that solar as we can. So let's do that by soaking it up through these cars on the road. So that over 2,000 chargers, mostly at multifamily and workplace sites, because that's where people are plugged in during the day. There's also energy resiliency. We've been doing some battery work. Batteries are core to this load flexibility model, the megawatt. That was a cool concept. I got to add that to my vocabulary. How are we making watts? A lot of that is through battery technology, which is so tricky, and we can talk about the problems there. But being involved in the nascent battery installation process, we've learned a lot of lessons, but have found that MCE's role as a load serving entity, a lot of the benefit that we can provide is incentivizing installations of these things. Maybe it's not an upfront and subsidization of the battery, but it could be a long-term ongoing support through some of the bill tariff structures that we were talking about earlier. So just to make it a concrete example, you have a house, you have a garage, you've installed a battery, and if you allow for that battery to be grid smart, you're communicating with the MCE germs, for example, it's shifting load. For every 20 kilowatt hours of battery that you allow for us to kind of shift around, you get an ongoing monthly bill credit directly on your bill. Again, you don't have to do anything, no additional check or paperwork. It just drops your bill, $20 a month. It just drops your bill every month, $20 for as long as, I think the residents, it's a 5-year term. So these are ways that CCAs can help incentivize resiliency as well as electrification, and then of course equity, health, and safety. Portable batteries don't have as much of a grid benefit, but obviously have quite a bit of resiliency benefit, especially for medical customers who may depend on that electricity as a life or death situation. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick glance. How many people are familiar with Richmond or from the Bay? Okay, we don't have to. Well, some are from out of town. That's great. I'll do just. Richmond's right up the road. It's right. It shares a bridge with San Rafael connecting into Marin, and it has been a historic industrial hub. And actually, Jim and Rosalind know much more about Richmond. I will defer to them as the experts, but I have had the pleasure of serving Richmond through MCE. We've generated power for them since 2012. So here's just a snapshot of, no, not 2012, 2014, I think. And so what we have found is we are retrofitting homes to participate in this VPP. There's a lot of older housing stock. Jim will talk more about that in a moment. And also the social impact bond, which Jim will talk about, helps address some of the vacancy and abandonment issues that you see in certain parts of town. But there, across the Bay and across California, there's this need for affordable housing, and Richmond is not an exception to that. What makes, there's additional elements that make Richmond very interesting. The Chevron refinery has been there since before the city incorporated. The refinery has actually been there since before town was town. And when you look at the history of Richmond, you have a lot of older housing stock because it was built to be temporary. It was a port that was building a lot of ships for the World War II wartime effort. A lot of people came looking for work. There was a lot of people coming to Richmond looking to help contribute to the war effort. And so a lot of housing was built for that influx of workers that is still around today. But it was made to be temporary at the time. It wasn't. So there's a lot to be done in terms of retrofits. Is what I'm trying to get to. The presence of the refinery also means that there's a high asthma rate, 99th percentile, when you look at all other districts across California, which makes it a CARB designated AB 617 community, which just means it has a high air pollution indication. So that when I was talking about being very sensitive to indoor air quality concerns, that is part of the reason why folks in Richmond are very aware of air quality issues, especially with the flaring of the refinery that has been quite negative in terms of health impacts for the whole community. So my apologies, this slide looked better yesterday. Got tinkered with, I don't know how. So it looks like a lot of text. It looks like a lot, that's all I can say, apologies. But the takeaways here that I wanted to touch on, and we can answer some questions about, am I doing on time? You're doing okay. I just wanted to do some takeaways when you looked across the profiles of the people we were engaging with. You really needed, there's so much to learn. So Jim's gonna talk about how some of the homes are fully built from the studs up. And we had a PDF talking about how's your home gonna be built from the studs up. And then we had some homes where they're just gonna get a thermostat. Mm-hmm. Be careful with who gets what. Be careful. Because if someone is just getting a thermostat, it's like, wait, I get a battery and I get a water heater and I get. And we show up and you're like, you ready for your thermostat? They're like, what? I thought I was gonna get the whole thing. Be careful with how those expectations, and that could, how you set expectations, and that could be as simple as what file gets attached to the email, right? Mm-hmm. So I wanted to put that out there. Also, be creative. We found a lot of gaps in funding. I keep mentioning roofs. Mm-hmm. Also, electrical panel upgrades are needed. There's no electrical panel fund in the state of California to go after, right? So MCE, we're very committed to this project. We found additional dollars that we contributed to the project to make up for these gaps, which is why CCA can be a really helpful partner to you as you exploring your own grid smart programs. Also, I think I mentioned this, there was a lot of heartache around batteries at the beginning when batteries first started getting installed in homes. There was turnover, there was there was a lack of technical information. There was also people just going out of business, people showing you they had all the technical expertise. Okay, let's go into business. And then all of a sudden they filed for bankruptcy. Or then all of a sudden their technology doesn't work. And then all of a sudden you just installed a lot of paperwork. So you gotta be flexible. There was a lot of turnover with contractor partners and also technology partners. Also just being responsive. We ended up inheriting a bias for our retired population in Richmond just because of how we structured the program. And the phone calls sometimes ended up not just being about let's make sure your water heater is on the right setting, but what did happen to your grandchild? Oh, you broke your leg? What happened? Are you okay? And we, developing, there's we won't have to go too far into this, but there is a loneliness epidemic. And so when someone gives you a call on the phone and they're interested in helping you improve your home, sometimes these calls end up taking a lot longer. And sometimes they take a lot longer because some of these customers became quite impatient for whatever reason. I have this up here. I started NASA. I'll just give this one example. Please let me know how I'm doing time. But we're talking about things and concepts and we're trying to use simple language, right? We're trying to use simple language so we're not, upper tower, white ivory tower, upper echelons, right? And then some customers are like, are you speaking down to me? You think I'm dumb? I started NASA. That's a quote from a customer. I don't know if he did. I don't know if he did. But there's a lot of flexibility and patience that are necessary in these calls, and the calls can go quite long. I also just want to point out that scalding shower comment. This is one I learned a lot about. You're essentially saying we're gonna flex some of the devices in your home, right? But I'll never forget this phone call with a gentleman who was saying, well, you're gonna mess with my water heater. What if you turn it up way too high? What if I slip in the shower and I fall and I get scalded? I could die. And are you responsible for that? Oh, I've never forgotten that. And then, you go through, well, we're not actually adjusting temperature, we're adjusting when it gets hot, right? Like, no, but what if you drop it too low? Then there's bacteria growing in the water. And then I'm showering in bacteria water, then I could die. These sound like exaggerations, they're not. I won't go through all of them, but there was a lot of lessons learned. I think the takeaway was set expectations. Be very flexible, be very kind, be very patient, understand their needs, pivot when you need to, and someone tell me how to translate virtual power plant, because there is not. Jim, I'm gonna leave this for you. don't have much more to say about it. But I did just want to say the way that we're building this, you can kind of think about it creating these invisible pockets of power in the community, in someone's garage, in someone's backyard. These are ways to improve the community and push us all forward together. I will end there and hand it back to my speakers.
Now we'll be hearing from Natalie.
Thank you. Would it work if I perfect. Well, I think you're gonna hear pretty much the same thing for me. Right now. But yes, hi, I'm Natalie Espinosa, and I'll be speaking today about our experience on Basket Avocado Heights. And I worked mostly on our community outreach and engagement, and on how we were able to get participants to be a part of our project. But one thing that, if you were in the session earlier today, they spoke a lot about what we did for our project, but we didn't speak too much about the area. So I really appreciated what you did by setting the stage for Richmond, and I'll speak a little bit about Basket Avocado Heights here, and I'll explain. I don't have the map on here, but the area is an area of Los Angeles County that is unincorporated Los Angeles County. It is surrounded by 3 of the most heavily trafficked freeways, and it is also where the largest battery recycling plant west of the Mississippi is located right there. It is projected to now have, I believe, 90 plus days of, I think 100 plus degree weather annually. And it is a community that will, that is mostly elderly folks are the folks that own the homes there. And so what did we learn? We learned a lot. We made a lot of assumptions, and we had to learn a lot to be successful. So we had to provide authentic community-led outreach and provide customer support through partnerships and diverse strategies. And with our partners, we had presentations and workshops and demos, pop-ups, canvassing. We threw spaghetti at the wall, and that was the way that we were able to get people to participate in our program. But with those assumptions that we made, we were able to transform the story. So we launched BASI, and we assumed that the offering of no-cost home upgrades would naturally drive enrollment. And we learned that participation is not transactional, it's relational. And so with that, we enrolled 53 households across 2 phases. And only after redesigning how we did that were we able to build the trust of the community, and were we able to build and design this program. I'm there. So trust in infrastructure, not our traditional infrastructure, community infrastructure. Residents wanted to know, who is this? Is this legitimate? Where is the catch? What is the catch, basically? So we had to tell them, what's the catch? What is it here? And really what it came down to was telling them we needed to prove something to the state, that this was worth investing in their community. And then we were able to work with them, and we were able to work with the institutions that they trusted. They trusted their school district, they trusted their county supervisor, and the local CBOs. And we were able to, from there, implement the case management as a relationship-based model. And then from there, we were able to implement more time into developing that visible presence and implement more funding for them. And from there, we were able to have that be a central part of our program design. And from there, we were able to develop more of a community-based infrastructure to have that project be successful for them. Now, after that, we realized that initially throwing everything at everybody in our first conversations was really, really overwhelming for our participants. From a policy lens, it's really exciting to be able to say you can get all of these things all at once. From a homeowner lens, it was really too much, and folks would get very confused automatically, and they would just walk away and say, nope, not for me, that's a lot. So we needed to simplify the messaging, and we needed to phase in the offerings from there. So once we were able to do that and introduce more tangible steps for them, and not talk down to people, but just say, we'll start with this first thing, and that would be something like a stove or a heat pump water heater, then we could come in with something that would be a bit more intense for them. Then they were able to buy in on our program and say, okay, I trusted you first with this technology that was a bit more feasible for me to think about, like a stove in my house. Then I would be willing to move forward with you with something that's a little less something that I had ever thought about in my home. So simplify first, expand later, and then that complexity actually was able to get folks to enroll in the program and trust in the program and go from there. Right. But then one of the hardest lessons for us was to accept that energy upgrades are rarely important or the most urgent issue in someone's household. Inflations, fires, and then fires again, and then fires again, and medical emergencies. We just really had to obviously accept that real life in people's households were not stable. Participants dropped off not because they weren't interested in receiving these things in their home, but because life intervened. We had to secure extensions for grants, and we had to right size our scope. Roof replacements, panel upgrades, we had to fit that into our projects. And from there, like was mentioned earlier, more than 50% of our projects had to receive some sort of roofing upgrade. May it have been a partial roof replacement, but we had to also think about the fact, what are we doing here if we're going to turn away people's homes just because their roofs are not eligible for the solar upgrade? So we had to go back and redesign what we were doing here and go back to those folks and replace their roofs. So the equitable programs have to be designed for this instability. The flexibility isn't the bonus feature, it's the essential part of the project and the program design. And then geography really shapes the participation in these programs. Our project was in an unincorporated Los Angeles County. That meant we didn't have a mayor's office to work with, we didn't have a city newsletter, we didn't have a civic hub. It really limited our communication channels. We had to go to the community through field outreach and through very specific partnerships. So we also had to expand to some of our adjacent cities to improve our outreach. It made even talking to some of those cities a little awkward, but at the end of the day, people bought in and worked with us on mailers, and we were able to work closely with some other organizations and host those pop-up events and work closely from there. So the program design just had to account for this more organic governance structure, and that geography really shaped participation for us for a while. The community factor. So we also learned several practical design lessons. Working with homeowners in a low-income neighborhood meant we were working with intergenerational households. We reached youth through school outreach, but the decision makers were often the elderly folks that owned the home. So direct mail proved more effective. I was just talking to my cousin about this recently, and she was telling me she takes care of my grandmother. She said, "You don't know how excited your grandma is to go through the mail." And I said, "Oh, I know it, because the direct mailers were so effective in us getting people to participate in BASE. And also our senior center events were probably the most attended events out of all of our BASE in-person events. So that was just something we had to think about. The grandchildren attended events, adult children took over for their parents and paid bills, and that also was a big effect on how things were done for this project. And then ultimately the grandparents were the ones that had to sign off on what was being done in their homes. Next, referrals, which is what we had hoped at the beginning were going to be a big part of our project. They didn't scale. The enrollment process was just long and complex, and so they weren't positioned to really be ambassadors for the program. So it's something we just kind of had to abandon. That's what we had thought would be a good part of the project. Third, multiple installers just kind of created confusion for us, and so that's where we really, again, I'll bring it back, had to go with our case management style of one person, because residents needed clarity on who to call and when. So we really needed to invest in having our case managers in the project. So the common thread, we needed to design around how the households actually functioned and not how we assumed they were going to function. Next, what I just said. One consistent theme from participants was their need for reassurance. They wanted transparency about funding. They wanted clarity about risks. They needed a single point of contact, and we needed help when navigating scheduling. Case management was not the add-on, it was the backbone of participation. Them having somebody to call, somebody to email. I've not actually been directly related to this program in a while, and I just received an email 2 days ago that I helped direct that person. Ultimately, it's very, very important for the program. I just have 2 slides I'll do real quick. And then one thing that I'll continue to champion forever and ever is building the CBO capacity for the long term in these programs. Community-based organizations were essential for generating trust and awareness and for being a part of that case management team. But the building energy technologies that were just a new territory for a lot of our partners. We found that while CBOs were strong messengers, they needed deeper technical fluency to confidently answer questions and also to buy in on our program themselves, and to answer the questions and support the residents through that decision-making process. So if we want equity, we can't just contract the CBOs to do the outreach. We have to invest in them long-term on their capacity, training, education, and shared learning. And with their capacity building, it's a long-term strategy for durable market transformation in this field. So what does opening doors to partnership and engagement really take? It's trust before technology, flexibility before efficiency, simplicity before scale, and people before policy. So. Thank you.
That was great. Now we're gonna hear from Therese about the EcoBlock.
Great, thank you. So I'll be talking about our block engagement strategy as well as the formation of an association to co-own the solar. So when we thought about, designing this, the advanced energy community, we were trying to figure out, well, what's the scale, right? If you want to really rapidly reduce greenhouse gases, where do you begin? Family, individual seems too small, city, district, region, it seems too big. And so we really thought the neighborhood or block would be that kind of sweet spot. That's where we started from. The way we engaged our block is we asked blocks to self-nominate, right? And I think this, it became a better strategy than we even initially thought. It was really successful because the community was invested. They were already engaged. We had leadership on the block that had already talked to people, had already recruited a cadre of people. So it ended up being more, like I said, more successful than we thought. We hired a community liaison for outreach, and we had 2 months to get a block. So she was hitting the trail in terms of talking to libraries and churches, and I think we talked to all of the city council members, and I think she went to 35 different organizations and just let them know about this. So, but it was Jennifer that got the block. Thank you. Stop.
Hi, Block.
Not your block, but you were instrumental. Yeah, we didn't know where it blocking. We reviewed the top 4 blocks. We met with the leadership. We actually went out to the communities and met with community members, answered a bunch of questions, worked with City of Oakland and PG&E to be like, which block do you like? And that's how we ended up with our block. We reviewed the energy and bill data. We also did a kind of a soft commitment from the neighbors, because it was like, if we're going to choose you, we want to know that you're not going to leave. And so we had this very letter of intent. So messaging was really critical. I'm an energy nerd, I'm an academic, and so I go into these areas and it's like, I'm interested in energy, but they're interested in security. There were stolen vehicles that were being dumped on the block and parts out. And they were like, well, okay, abandoned car, how do we get rid of that? There are people dumping toilets and mattresses in the sidewalk strips. How do we deal with that? Not enough parking, we weren't able to deal with that question in this project. But their homes are inefficient and leaky, poor air quality. One woman described that she goes outside and she smells the gas meter leaking. Right? Oh, good, you're gonna fix that. Yep. Yes, we are. And in this location, they weren't so susceptible to power outages, but you can imagine other communities that might make more sense. So for future eco blocks, heat events. Yeah, one woman said to me, I cannot use my upstairs when it gets hot in Oakland, right? And so this was being able to, again, address those quality of life issues. We connect them to the local police beat, to bulky trash pickup. I think we're trying to provide more comfortable homes, indoor air quality issues, trying to lower energy bills. That'll happen when the solar is fully connected. And we saw over the time that we saw people working together. They had Sunday trash pickup days and shared Ridwell, so they started sharing that as a block and just talking about these technologies. We spent a lot of time just trying to build trust, right? So I think we had over 10 block meetings, and this is pretty typical, where we're during COVID, so we're wearing masks and learned pretty quickly that we needed to, well, the block leadership said to me, Therese, don't come out there with all the old white men from the university to our meetings. Make sure that your team is representing diversity. That's not gonna read well with our block. So that was really key. And we had to learn to listen. I'm an academic, I lecture. No, listen, right? You know, so we ended up, instead of having one person talk, we broke up into these small group meetings. And it just really learned it had to be a two-way, it had to be a dialogue, right? We had to get feedback from them about what we were doing. We had a musician on the block, so we led all of our meetings began with music, which was a lot of fun. We brought food, and eventually people started bringing, you know, it became almost kind of like a potluck, so that was fun. We provided interpretation in Chinese and Spanish in some of the more critical meetings, not all of them. And we hired a woman of color as our community liaison, which was really critical. Connecting neighbors, and so I mentioned this in the previous talk, but just tangible benefits. This was really, really, really important. You know, you can, energy is inside your home, it's invisible, you don't see it, but that planted tree, yes, that's where you start reading, you know, eco, right, or something to do with greenhouse gases. So we helped them, like I said, we had 20 people come out to our biodetention planting, a lot of fun, a lot of kids, that was really great. Laundry landscape irrigation workshop, same thing. We had, we just tried to provide education through our meetings. We had a newsletter. We had block leadership that we worked with individually, so separately from the rest of the block, and then I'll talk through the creating the homeowners association. It says low battery. Do we need to plug that in? Oops. Or else it'll be an interpretive dance for the rest of plugged in. Plug, but no, it's not connected. Okay, there we go. There we go. What do I? All right. So here's an example of our newsletter, and it was, you know, between 8 and 12 pages or something like that, and it was monthly for about 2.5 years, where some of it was just what's going on in the project, and some of it was, we had an undergrad who wrote an article about kind of the history of Oakland, and so it was just like, oh, let's talk about food in Oakland or music in Oakland. That was fun. And some of it was just we ran about, I don't know, 15 or so of these appliance 101 or utility 101. Just had a very talented graphic artist that works with us and was able to put together these very graphically engaging how to and you know, learn about these new technologies. Economies of scale in terms of the neighbor peer effect. I think I talked about this earlier, but you've heard of solar adoption is contagious, right? Sun City did a study on this a number of years ago. You install solar in a house, you go back a couple of years later, you see that the cluster starts building over time. That's a very real effect, right? And yes, heat pumps and induction stoves are not as visible from outside the street as solar, but the concept is the same. Why does that work? Your neighbor is able to ask you, hey, how much did that cost? Who is the contractor? What is the maintenance like? You know, you get to ask those questions about new technologies. And so we're trying to, with EcoBlock, we were trying to create opportunities for people to talk about induction stoves or heat pumps or whatever, and have those conversations with people. I was trying to explain about TOU rates and in front of a couple of people, and one person didn't understand what I was saying. And one of her neighbors literally said to me, Therese, I got this. And then like, step away, and then he explained it to her. Awesome, he knows it better than I do. And he was able to jump in and make conversations like that happen, which were really critical. Okay, so the association formation, 5 neighbors stepped up to take leadership. They were the first board, they volunteered. We worked with an incredible HUD Law. They specialize in cooperatives. And so they were the ones that looked at, gosh, we're gonna try to share rooftop solar. How do we do that? And they were the ones that suggested the homeowners association, very light version of it. And over about 9 months, guided the board to develop the bylaws and the membership agreement. And that's some of the stuff that we want to, again, provide those templates on our website for others to use, right? But again, we're not trying to just do it once. And she was the one that talked to us about this consensus decision-making process. And the idea is like, if you try to make a decision about something, you hear from everyone. Everyone has to say something, either their opinion about what it should be or an objection And then we went through all the objections, and that's how we came up to a consensus. And we were able to use this not just for the elements of the bylaws and membership agreement, but also for like, where do you want the electric vehicle charger to be on your block? Or what of these 5 designs for the end of block stormwater mitigation, which one makes sense to you? And we were able to come up with solutions that had no objections, right? Which I think was pretty cool. You know, we were able to really get to consensus. And so we went through this process of forming the HOA. Now I don't think I'll go into the details of this. So some of the challenges I mentioned earlier too, worry about unpermitted work. We had at least one household that didn't join because of this. They were just, you know, look, I've had work done on my house. I don't want to deal with the city. The energy bills did go up in some homes. All of these homes were uninsulated, and it was because I hate to say this, but my contractor would say to me, I don't have someone small enough to fit in that attic. And that kind of scares me when I hear things like that. So it was just that the house was so old and the pitch of the roof or the attic space was just too small. We couldn't insulate it. Well, it had impacts on the design of the heating systems. And in these cases too, a lot of times the customer didn't know or didn't work with PG&E to move from their gas heat rate to an electric heat rate. And so that, you know, that causes their bills to go up. And in a couple of cases, the occupant didn't know how to use our new thermostat. So that's on us, and we need to do better. Recently, we've had a number of homeowners very concerned about the upgrade, I call them nasty grams from the county assessor's office saying, hey, you had, permits were pulled, you had work done. Great, tell us how much the value is so we can increase your property taxes, right? And it's not applicable for solar in California. It's not applicable for like and replacements like our water heaters and heat pumps. But homeowners don't know that. And so it scares them. And then it causes a lot of panic, right? There are a lot of renters that were worried about rent increases. In Oakland, there's, rent control. But I know that others, other companies have worked with having a property owner sign something that says, I'm not going to increase the rent. I think I'm almost done here. Oh yeah, the solar interconnection application documents are not available in Chinese or Spanish. So I think this is my final slide. So change moves at the speed of trust. That was very true for our project. Tangible projects, yeah, education, neighbors talking to each other. I would have to say that we would not have gotten the hard to reach neighbors if it hadn't been for the neighbors talking to each other. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Again, my name is Jim Becker, and I am actually now the co-CEO of the Richmond Community Foundation, RCF Connects. I'll be retiring the end of this year, and Rosalind Welch is the who's been with the foundation just almost over 10 years, so she's not new to this work either. I want to start, first of all, by saying that when you work in communities, I mean, you really have to know and understand and build relationships with the people you work with. So I'm going to start with a couple of things before I get into the slides. First of all, in land acknowledgement. In Richmond, land acknowledgement's a big deal. We sit on unceded land of the coastal Miwok, Huichan, and Ohlone people, and we make sure that that's not forgotten. This is also Black History Month. Right? We want to acknowledge that. Granted, it's the shortest month of the year, which I know is, a joke with some folks. But it is also the time where we have to focus and really think about the contributions of Black Americans to our society and our community. And we also have to know what's happening on the ground in our city and our community. And we just had a great civil rights leader pass away this week, right? Jesse Jackson passed away. So that matters. And if you don't know that, and you walk into a city and you're not familiar with that, it's going to be hard work. It really is. When I first came to Richmond in 1989, people thought I was a cop. Right? They're like, who is this guy? Why is he here? What's he doing? But I did spend time to really build a lot of good, positive relationships. And with Richmond, we're really lucky. We have a really strong neighborhood council system and they are our go-to for everything. Anytime we've got a project or an idea, we are in front of the neighborhood council, meeting with their leader, their residents, and we are saying, here's what we're thinking, help us figure this out, what do you guys think? So, Richmond had a problem after 2008, and the problem was there were about 280 abandoned blighted homes, and you saw a picture of one of them earlier today on the slide, that burned out shell. That's actually one of our houses that we worked on. That's not just like a stock photo off of Google. That is actually, then you saw the happy couple, standing in front of their house, same house, just, a year later. So we take that stuff seriously, and the people who bought the house, she's a teacher in the school district, he's active military. That's where they grew up. They bought in their own community, their own home. So that kind of thing really matters to us. But the project began by conversations with the neighborhood councils and our city manager and our elected officials around how do we reduce the amount of vacant blighted properties in the city of Richmond, right? Not only that, but how do we, if we rebuild these properties, prevent displacement of our existing residents and build home ownership for the residents who live there already? And ultimately, how do we attract private investment capital to do this work? Because these single lot infill projects, and some of these houses are 900 square feet. This is not something state and federal government want to deal with. They want big 200, 300 unit multifamily projects that actually cost more to build than to restore these homes. But that's the funding structure. So we had to create our own financing mechanism. And we created, you heard the term earlier, a social impact bond. We were studying bonds going around the world. Britain had a few. We looked at the cases in Rikers Island, where it was a prison system, social impact bond structure, and they were all really complicated. They all relied on cost savings, which would then be reimbursed by government. And we thought, okay, there's got to be a better way. So people much smarter than me who were at the table said, well, I think we might actually be able to create a quasi-municipal bond that we could sell to investors and raise the capital that way. And we did. And we're now working on that same program with the city of Pinole. And people are like, City of Pinole, why City of Pinole? Well, Terra Hills, if you know the city of Pinole, is part of the city of Pinole. And that is a very underinvested part of the city. Most people don't even know it's part of the city because it's physically separate in a lot of ways. So what we love about this is it allows us to build a sustainable funding stream, and I'll talk more about that. It allows us to keep, this one says Pinole because that's our newest city, but can keep Pinoleans, keep Richmonders in their city as homeowners. We do equitable local hiring and contracting. That is critically important. In Richmond, we have a great project called Richmond Build. We partner with them. It's part of the city's job training and workforce development program. We also reduce code enforcement costs, right? Because you may not know this unless you're a housing geek like me, but cities can put all the liens they want on a property, but until someone either buys it or the sale transfers, nobody pays those liens, right? People just walk away from those properties. So we gave code enforcement back almost $500,000 in unpaid code enforcement liens by taking on these projects, right? Because we're like, the city's got to be whole on this. One of the great impacts was we had a dramatic reduction in property crimes in the neighborhoods where we worked. City Police Department worked with us. They were right on top of things. And we've had issues, no question about it. You heard earlier today in our project that, a bunch of batteries were stolen, right? Well, that was us, and our partners. We also had someone, we acquired a property, we fenced it up, we were getting ready to build construction. For those of you from Richmond, you'll know this was on North 5th Street. Someone pushed in an RV onto the land full of garbage and lit it on fire.
Oh my gosh.
So, you have to get an abatement tow. Well, nobody wants to take that. So we have to get the city code enforcement to work with us to actually get somebody to get that off the property. So these are some of the challenges, but yes?
Can you also talk about the soil?
Oh, yeah, sure. So obviously, when we have issues like that, we have soil contamination. And we are not willing to sell a home to a family who's a first-time home buyer if their soil is contaminated. So we also do phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessments. And if there is contamination, we clean it up, right? Because we're not gonna let some child, who's got lead in the soil have physical or mental damages down the road because we sold them a dirty house. So we're not your typical contract flipper. Let's see, there we go. Okay. So how do these bonds work? All right. So the city, the site team, which is our partners, community leaders, residents, RCF, and our investment partners all have a role to play. So the city is the conduit issuer of the bond, and it provides legitimacy to the program, right? Investors are like, oh, the city's doing this, the community foundation's in it, we're gonna join up, we're gonna be part of this. Where possible, we get expedited permitting because of this partnership with the city. So if permits normally take 6 months, we're usually in and out in about 30 days. Now, not every time, but most of the time. Also, the city doesn't incur any risk and has no obligation to repay the bonds. So when we say that to a city, all the council members are like, well, yeah, we're gonna do that, right? Well, we hold the risk, the investor holds the risk. That's kind of the trade-off. So the city really is just the conduit issuer of these bonds. If a city is not a charter city and has no authority to issue bonds, there's several joint power authorities that we can work with to make that happen. And that's what we're doing with the city of Panola right now. So the site team, right? These are our neighborhood councils, these are our residents, these are the realtors and the bankers and the mortgage companies, everybody, we bring them all together. What's great about the neighborhood councils is they help us identify the properties. They're like, all right, you really gotta go after these 3, because that's what's creating all the chaos in our city, in our neighborhood. So we'll go, okay, so we sit down with code enforcement, police department, they're like, okay, here's what we know about the owners, here's the potential owners, or the owners are dead, they passed away, we're gonna have to probate it. So we've put all of these processes in place. But again, in the end, they're all sort of bubbling up from the community. We don't go after properties unless the residents of that neighborhood are telling us that one, right? Go after that one. Because they live there, they know what the problems are. I go home at night, I drive back to Antioch, which if you know Contra Costa County, it's on the way other side of the county, right? So I don't live there, I spend a lot of time there, but I don't live there. But they know what happens at night when we all go home. We also prioritize local and BIPOC, for those who don't know, Black, Indigenous people. That's contractors and developers, right? Because that's absolutely critical. They have to be local. They've got to represent the communities they're working in. And they need to be known, right? People need to know them. So we are the program facilitator at RCF. We set up a separate LLC to acquire and rehab the properties. And then we sell them to first-time home buyers through existing first-time homebuyer programs. So Spark Point, Richmond Neighborhood Housing Services, Community Housing Development Corporation, their graduates have first right of purchase. Now, pricing these can be tricky. And here's again where the residents really have to be engaged. Because what do you think the first thing that came up when we said, well, we want to sell these below market? What was the first challenge from neighborhoods? Who wants to guess?
My property value.
My property value is going to go down, right? My property value is going to go down. And believe it or not, in these neighborhoods, there's a lot of home ownership, most of them seniors, but there was still a lot of home ownership. So that was a genuine concern. So we worked out a deal with the neighborhood councils to say, okay, we are going to price it in a way that doesn't affect, it'll be slightly below, but it's not going to affect your value. And then we are going to add down payment assistance on top of that. So we have 2 down payment assistance programs. We have one funded by US Bank, which is $10,000 grants. And then we have one funded by local community churches. Are we getting close? Oh, wait. Oh, I'm already done. All right. Woo, that went quick. Okay. So we have, we have local churches who are investing in a Black wealth builder fund specifically for Black home ownership. Now, I won't touch on that more, but if you want to learn more, tonight I'm actually presenting at the Black Panther Museum in Oakland, and I'll be talking all about the Black home ownership fund. So And then our capital partners, our banks, buy the bonds, they get huge CRA credit for this. It moves them to the exceptional level. They can use that to get reduced borrowing from the Fed. They can use that to also get preferred lending. They can use that really to buy new banks, buy other banks. So Mechanics Bank, which was our first investor, was like, oh, we're gonna buy that bank and we're gonna do this. So it's a win-win for just about everybody. Real quickly, and I'll finish up, the Z&E features that we put in these homes. Solar panels, battery storage, EV charging, if there's a garage, appliances and smart features. Our construction, we do zero net emission building design, low water usage, low embodied carbon construction, and we really focus on indoor air quality. So no VOC paint, I mean, all of that, right? We take all that into consideration. And then what's the benefit? Well, it reduces the living costs to operate the house. So it's affordable to buy and it's affordable to live in. And now with our partnership with MCE, with this virtual power grid, they even get a rebate, right? They get money back for living in an advanced energy home. Rosalind and I were talking earlier about one of the challenges about all of this is we use really high level language. And it's not that we have to dumb the language down, but we have to actually phrase it in ways that people understand it and understand the pros and the cons, right? Because not all of this is there. Again, we've got, oh, this is probably your slide,
I know,
isn't it?
I was just
We
like,
got
that
a
was-
duplicate slide here. So, all right, I'm gonna finish that up. So, all right, so what's inside the homes? And I'm just gonna real quickly say, we've got high efficiency washers and dryers, dishwashers, refrigerators, induction ranges, smart heat pump water heaters, mini split HVAC systems, smart plugs, solar, battery storage. And I can't see what's on the bottom there. I'm missing
And a
that.
secret.
And a secret sauce. So that's it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to those super interesting presentations. Now we're gonna open it up for questions. I'm gonna have Lorianne pass around the mic. If anyone has questions.
Two questions.
Okay, hi, I'm Sarah Sharp with Central California Energy Collaborative. I love this panel. We are, I have to leave like really soon for a meeting, but we are just starting to do some whole home retrofits, very similar project in Kern County. And all the tips, like a lot of it was stuff I already knew, but it reinforced a lot of my approach. And I have some questions, probably a lot more questions. I probably want to definitely I know I've been talking to Natalie, so I want to actually but one thing I heard, I think I can't remember if it was Natalie or Alexandra or who said it, but you would give people a stove if that was what they as an entry. And since we're trying to do whole home retrofits, and actually so far the main pushback we get is that they don't want to do the stove because they don't want, people can put their tortillas or their rice or whatever on the induction stove, which I know is not true. So how did you handle that? And then I have another question. I can't remember. But yeah.
Okay. I think that was Natalie.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it on? Oh, there we go. Yes. So hello.
Yeah.
Okay. So we actually have Nanette in here, who now works at the Energy Coalition, but was originally with our CBO day one. And we hosted demos to actually have folks come. We had one of our induction stoves installed at the Jeff Seymour Center, one of the local community centers in El Monte, which was one of the nearby cities in the unincorporated area. And then we had a chef come and do a bilingual in English and Spanish demo to show people how they could make carne asada and how to actually do tortillas and the whole thing, basically the whole meal, so that they could see exactly how to cook. And from there, actually at that exact same time was when the LA Times had that big article come out talking about the health effects of having a natural gas stove in their home. So we had a lot of adoption right after that. For the induction stoves in folks' homes. But having that demo, we also recorded it in that moment. So for folks that were able to make it in person, it was great. And then after that, sharing it through the recording worked really well to get people to buy in on it. And then at the end of the day, some folks, that's just not gonna work for them, no matter how much we show them that they can do everything they could possibly do on a gas stove, so. Yeah.
Abhijit Pandey with TRC, and I just want to maybe piggyback on Sarah. We're actually working on a project together on electrification of homes with panel capacity constraints. So maybe a comment and a question. On the panel capacity question, I'm curious how many times that come up, and I think a few of you have mentioned there's incentive being provided. Just a plug that, we really want to push 120 volt or low wattage or low amperage devices, are efficient devices, and so happy to share more resources offline, but also curious what you learned from your work. And the second question, entirely separate, but since I have the mic, I came here largely because I wanted to ask this question to a previous panel, Alexander, you and Teresa and others were on, like, we hear this term prosumers thrown around quite a lot, right? And you all have said this in your presentations, and we've learned through our work, like, there is no one unified prosumer, right? There's different people at different stages of life with different levels of sophistication, life needs, and so on. And so I'm curious, as we scale this up, like the VPP efforts and the technologies and so on, how do you assess where your prosumers are, and how do you get them to where you want them to be? Or do you meet them where they are?
I mean, I'll start just by saying, we try to meet them where they are and then gradually move them. But when we have abandoned properties that we're doing, it's easy. We put in exactly what we want. But also in our project, we are retrofitting, and now out at East Contra Costa, we're doing even more of this work. And it's really, what are they willing to adopt is more the question for us. And if they don't want to do the stove, but they're willing to do solar, battery, and maybe the smart plugs, we'll start there.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, certainly. I think that the building flexibility into the structure is so necessary if you're going to co-optimize for a variety of different types of consumers, prosumers. I think one thing that I think helps us get there, this VPP tariff that we developed, is essentially a buffet of DERs. And it says, hey, if you're a homeowner and some of you will be interested in EVs. Some will never give up your gas car. And some, have these electrical panel constraints. Others have flexibility. You need to be able to create a system that provides incentives flexibly. So this tariff, for example, I think there are maybe 10 or 12 different types of DERs, each of which is like a scavenger hunt. I'm gonna find a plug over here and a water heater here and an EV here, and you stack them based on your own home's needs. I think as the VPP scales, we'll be able to track the adoption rate of the different DERs to kind of find a bit more trends. But I think at the outset, having the flexibility so that any house can participate is going to be critical. Yeah.
I can respond to the question about the panel. Okay. We decided to upgrade all our panels because it made sense for the microgrid, but we ended up realizing that we didn't need to do most of it. We had a couple of homes with 60, 70 amp panels, and we didn't feel we could get around that. But we have a home right now where it's 3 units, but it has a single meter. And we were just told, and we applied everything, NEM, everything was all under the single address. And now PG&E says, you need 3 meters. So we're gonna go back and say, you know what? We're withdrawing our service upgrade application, and we're gonna try to run 3 units on a 125 amp panel. And we're gonna have to buy the Charlie Copper 120 volt induction stove. So I'll reach out to you to get more feedback on that.
I want to add one more thing.
Please.
So, we replace all the panels too, but one of the interesting things is that most of the homes in Richmond were built between 1940 and 1944. The city was building 50,000 homes a year just to meet the demand of the workforce coming into town. So all the panels need to go. But the other challenge we're having is PG&E, when we do these, is requiring us now to pay for new transformers for them to be able to provide power
Should be
to
rate
the
based.
houses.
Yeah. Yeah, we at least got ours to be rate based because of that,
Okay.
so.
Thanks, yeah, good talk about panel upgrades also. Yeah, a lot of questions, but I think the one that I'll ask is, could you talk more about your communication with the, what are we calling them, prosumers? About potential rate increases or bill increases, not rate increases with upgrades, and how do you manage expectations around that? How much of that do you communicate, and what sort of feedback did you get from that?
I can start. So benefit of being a CCA is you have historic bill information. And so what we did, which was quite time demanding, was essentially develop a essentially a cost forecast for these customers, and then divided out the impact of the devices that they were considering. So first stage of the proposal, review the house, this is what you might be eligible for, what are you interested in? They pick A, C, B, D, right? Okay, now let's look at your bill and forecast it out, and see if you install just the battery, what's the anticipated impact? You have to make so many assumptions about PG&E rate increases, MCE rate increases, gas price increases. You're just using, the last couple of years, kind of trying to create a trend line of costs, so you can develop essentially a forecasted cost impact for that customer based on their historic load data, which we do have. And so what we found were, because we targeted low-income solar customers, the load itself was actually very small for most of these customers. And so electrifying anything was from a lot of them was actually going to increase their bills. We're talking, again, they're low income, but we're talking a, $5 to $7 increase in many cases. And that's when the conversation about the indoor air quality comes in. So like Natalie was talking about, that LA Times piece actually got a lot of traction because people started thinking a lot about the indoor air quality. And so, and in Richmond, where there are air quality impacts, indoor and outdoor, even though there was going to be that increase, there was also the buy-in to invest in the long term. But you show them I think we estimated like over a 10-year lifetime of some of these devices, what the bill impact would be over that time. And try to be as transparent with them as possible, because we didn't want to say, oh, everything's going to be great. It's and then they end up with higher bills and I get an angry phone call.
But better help.
But better help.
Do we have time for?
Yeah.
Okay. So comment and then question. So I'll just quickly, so Laurel with the Energy Coalition, the comment is Stacy also had to upgrade panels. Maybe later we can have more conversation around that. I have a lot to say. But the question is, over the next couple weeks, all the IOUs are having their,
Business
SB 1221 conversations on the zonal decarbonization. And so I can't help but look at the eco block as a great example. And so I was wondering if you could speak just maybe a couple points on what you see as like key to consider for those pilots from the learnings of eco block, knowing that this opportunity is coming soon.
Yeah, thank you for that. It was actually Becky mentioned, she was with Ava and then went to BBC. She reached out to us and said, hey, how did you get all those folks, contiguously there? That's amazing. And you could see by the image I showed this morning that we didn't get everybody, but we did get a number of contiguous households. So I do think there's a lot of places where they need to kind of retire the natural gas system. So I think you can be proactive in inviting, blocks to self-organize. I think that was key part of it, is just to get people to self-organize and talk about it amongst themselves and convince each other to do that. It requires some education and leadership there, but I think that was one really impactful part of it. I'd forgotten the other, so.
Self-organized.
Yeah, I think that's a key part of it. And I think I have a colleague that is working in the city of Richmond and PG&E and the Ortiz group and that group, big group that's doing a pilot project right now in the PG&E territory, and she just emailed me this week. We have a zone of 3, we have a zone of 7, you know, after 4 years, right?
Yeah.
And so I think my second comment would be that it's a journey, and I think you need to consider that. Like, I expect that in 5-10 years on EcoBlock, we might have 100%, right? And it's because Steve's gone across to Ivan's house and be like, show me, oh, that's how it works. Okay, well, show me your bills again. You know, and I think that's gonna be impactful, and just having the neighbors to talk to are gonna get those remaining folks on board, I think. But it does take time, and I think you have to build that in.
Do you think the non-energy elements are essential to kind of help folks people as well, or can it just be about
Oh,
energy?
absolutely. Like, I think, the health impacts, the studies I've been reading about where they, is it LBNL or AEA or one of those guys that got together and what they were doing the hood tests on gas stoves, and we're showing all of this data about all the crap that's going into your house from your gas stove. I think that is very impactful. I also saw another demonstration where a guy was making hot chocolate on his induction pot, and he puts his hand on it after he takes the pot off and puts his hand on it. You just sold every parent there. That's also very impactful. And it is warm still, but it's not, they're not gonna burn, right? So I think that is also very impactful. If you go after health, you go after, I love the cooking video idea. I wanna get that video. But you know, if you stress, you don't talk about choice, you don't get into those issues, you just talk about health. I have a Dyson air purifier in my home, and I didn't we got it because of the wildfires a number of years ago. And it wasn't until we still had a gas stove at the time, and it would just zip on every time I cooked. Oh my gosh, that's impactful, right? You're seeing all the crap that's going into your house every time you use that stove. So I would start there.
I'll just add about the health, even though, yes, Laura, we do work together, but I'll just add about the health thing that we had a grandmother tell us at that same demo. She said, and I'll never forget this, like you said, the things you never forget about a participant. She said, oh my God, did I give my granddaughter asthma? And those are the things that stick to you in those moments. And it had nothing to do with energy. It had absolutely everything to do with health. And so every time we think about natural gas, we are taking a concerted, you know, that it is a safety thing at the end of the day, at the end of the day, when we think about the thing that we have in our home every single day. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, everyone. Alex Lansberg with the San Francisco Electrical Construction Industry. So common question, general. So first of all, thank you for mentioning health impacts, because in all of your presentations, it seemed like that was gonna be one of my questions, like, did you talk about that? So I'm really glad to hear that it came up in the questions. Second, and this is more of a comment of something that we're doing in San Francisco. We've been working with a PG&E program sort of with the SB 679, I can't remember all the numbers. Anyway, 79, I don't know. Communities doing a whole home electrification pilot with IBW Local 6 electrician, and just a patchwork of different programs that are sort of being almost forced to cooperate together. And what we've actually found is that the whole home approach has really been appreciated by customers, by end users, because when you're dealing with a community like Richmond or something like maybe Hunters Point, where you have a lot of older homeowners who haven't been able to work on their homes or haven't been able to upgrade their homes to be able to get all those things done at the same time. One of the things that we found as far as panel upgrades is that people actually appreciate the future proofing by bringing them up to 200, and so that when if they're going to be passing the house down to family, if they're going to be looking at EVs down the line, they know that they don't have to deal with all this stuff. Because the reality is nobody likes to deal with construction. My question here is every single one of the programs that you guys have shown has really required a significant amount of hands-on bring people along and to recruit this, and we've seen that on our end as well. How do you envision scaling up at the level that we need? Because
Right.
what we're doing here isn't gonna work when we're trying to do this for a state of 40 million people.
I have opinions.
Yeah, go ahead.
We think working with cities is critical, and throughout this project, I have had so many people reach out to me. And community members, someone from Colorado called me once, and I think part of it is that people want information. And so I think first and foremost, get the information to the people that want it, get to the information to the people who are leaders in their community who want to bring this on. So I think that's first and foremost, but I also think cities can do a lot with just, again, getting this information out there. What kind of thermostat do I want with what kind of heat pump? Where should I start with? Should we do energy efficiency anymore? Is that an old concept? You just get these ideas out there and get it circulated, because people don't know what to do. And I think we have to work there first. We have to start there.
I'll just say too that this involves for us public policy, advocacy, and lobbying. We as a community, so community foundations are the only philanthropic institutions that are allowed to lobby. Family foundations, things like that are not. So we step into that role in a big way. So both at the city and county level, but also at the state level, we are pushing for policies that require this, right? Particularly for, there's still areas in Contra Costa County that can be built new. And so having those up front, where it's like, it's not an option anymore. The city policy is any new home built, any upgrade done is gonna have to have those. And that's where we put our time and energy.
Los Angeles County doesn't really have places that can be built new, I will say. Not very many at this point, that's okay. But I will say that for scale there, I would heavily emphasize that we need to work with community-based organizations that you wouldn't necessarily think of. There's not necessarily, we can't always be thinking about the environmental groups and the groups that are always focused on saving the planet. We need, our CBOs were mostly focused on bike access and on harm reduction and stopping smoking. And that's all has to do with health. And so I think the way that we work with our strong advocates and our strong messengers to get the communities on board to everybody getting on with participating in these programs is by working with these strong advocates that are already within the community. And then, like I said at the end of the presentation, we educate them on how this is all connected to health and public health. And then that's how we get everyone to decarbonize and move forward. My opinion, at least.
Unless there's another question, I have a very different answer.
Oh,
Yeah, go for it.
Is there another question?
Yeah, hi, Floyd Kennedy with Sierra Resource Consultants. I really like the use of case manager.
You get to talk right into the mic.
Oh, yeah,
It might not be on. Was it on?
closer in?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Gets picked up.
Can you hear now?
yes.
Thanks. Floyd Kennedy with Sierra Resource Consultants, and I really like the use of the term case manager. I haven't heard it in context of an AEC, but it makes sense. And I'm wondering, so who was that? Was that a single point of contact? Was it the same person assigned to a build?
It was me. For a while, it was me. But it was also Nanetson when she was working at Day One at the CDO. And then as the project transitioned, it was also Jalen there at the back. And so it was staff within the Energy Coalition and then staff within the CDO. And so as the program kind of grew, we were able to transition between the community-based organization, working really closely with our community-based organization, and then within our own organization at the Energy Coalition, because we were since we were the prime on the project, we were the ones that had the connection with all of the installers. Because like I said, there were so many installers that it was very confusing for our participants to know who to call. So we said, okay, installers, please leave our participants alone and just let us communicate with the participants from there, and we will schedule everything for them and make sure that everything isn't confusing anymore. So as time went on, we were able to be the case managers from there. We've since iterated a bit and worked more closely with our community-based organizations to help train them up to work more closely with the participants from there and help that process be easier. But yeah, it was something that as time went on, we realized we can't. Also, I think maybe everyone has had experience with installers. They can be a bit gruff sometimes, and that can sometimes lead to participants saying, no, thank you, I don't want to participate anymore. So we wanted to mitigate that as well. So, but yeah, originally, at one point it was just me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to work on this.
The model would be to train up the CBOs and transition to.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice that, I was thinking of the graphic about the technology stack in Richmond, which had a battery, a communicating thermostat. Did you notice that the frequency of outreach to a case manager went up as the technology stack got more complex, or was it?
I think at the beginning, there was a lot of outreach to get folks to sign on. And then we also, one of our partners, Grid Alternatives, they needed to go through a lot of paperwork with folks, and they had their own outreach coordinators. And so they did a lot more of we actually depended a lot on them at that point, because that helped to create a lot of buy-in as well for the project. So once they were in with Grid Alternatives, it kind of eased the process for the participants. And then from there, it was just a quick phone call to, okay, now we need to schedule you for the heat pump water heater. Okay, now we need to schedule you for this next person. And then after that, as long as everything was smooth sailing, it was a simple phone call for scheduling after that, and then installers. But, Jalen can speak to it depending. We always have, sometimes things were a little harder depending on it. If an installer fell through a roof or fell through a ceiling once on Christmas Eve or not. But it was dealt with. It was okay. Sometimes things happen. Yeah.
Let's go back to Alexandra.
Oh,
to
sure.
Answer the scaling question, then we can go to the next question.
Of course.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, happy to.
There's another.
We'll go to the.
Just the last bit to talk about scaling. I think the different perspective might be, the VPP pilot was net new installs, right? They got a letter with my spit on it. Yeah. They opened it was very hands-on, as you were saying, Alex. And I think that, I think the shift away from net new deployment towards integration with existing deployment, and I'm going to give an example in just a second, cuts down that hand holding significantly. So for example, I mentioned MCEZV program, you go to buy it at the dealership and you get the rebate right there. And if at that point of sale, you're getting the QR code that says make this car even smarter by scanning here and download the app, that reduces so much of that engagement and hand holding too. So for the VPP Flex, which is the second CEC grant to build upon the pilot, one of the things that we'll be doing is integrating with different OEMs and bringing their technology into an open ADR communication with the DERMs that we've been talking so much about. And so, you bought your heat pump water heater at the Home Depot. What's the QR code to scan and make this smarter, as opposed to going to the person's house and saying, do you need to know water heater?
And I should be clear, I think for the private market, I think stuff like that, I think retrofit on resale ordinances, things like what Jim was saying all work. I'm thinking more of like low-income families, low-income households where we're already seeing incentive funds and support funds getting clawed back and getting reduced. So I'm thinking more of the people who can't do this themselves.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of them.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lauren Weston, the Executive Director at Actera Action for a Healthy Planet, and we work with some of you, which is awesome. I just want to call out two things that have been mentioned throughout. One, the roofing thing. So we run a program called Green at Home. We've had this issue with homes in East Palo Alto. We go and do weatherization and electrification retrofits, and we use Habitat for Humanity to redo the roofs. So just note that. They're a great partner. The other is, that was also mentioned, is the training component. So if you're using non-environmental CBOs, a new program out by Ecology Action is actually doing trainings for things like EVs on their dime fund by carb, I think. So I would connect with Ecology Action if you have groups you want to train, and it's a referral system. So you send the groups to them and they will do the training for you if you plan on using them again. So there's a lot of resources available. The other thing is, I don't know how you did the planning process, but I know that our CBO partners and Actera all do food and babysitting and all those things. So if those were lessons you learned late, it might have been good to connect with CBOs that are doing those in their communities of service, because that's ingrained in what we contract with our partners to do. It's just kind of what we do. It's built into the work. So that might have saved a little time. So just maybe connect with more CBO partners. That's there.
So I didn't mention this, but to your point, so a couple things. Probably our biggest partner is Cocoa Kids. It's our county child care council. And so we have a big commitment to electrifying family daycare homes and getting them, because there's a bigger impact there, right? You've got multiple kids, you've got a family, there's business income for the homeowner or the resident. And when we bring people together from the community to help us plan, we pay them. Right? So you gotta do that. Yeah.
Which means plan to pay your CBO partners too.
What's that?
Plan to pay your CBO partners too.
Yeah.
Maybe better than you already are.
Yeah, I will say, when we did do that demo, it was for the whole community to come, and we had all the kids come in, and we had events for the kids to come in and color, remember, and it was meant to be a family event and all that, and so yes, it was thankfully not a lesson learned. It was more of a lesson learned to think about educating more about the technologies that we were installing at the end of the day. So it's all good information. I'm glad to share. All right. I was like, where? Yeah, I was like,
Great. Thank you so much for all the questions and for a great discussion. Yeah, today we heard from 4 experts on community and customer engagement, and they talked to us about the strategies they use to overcome a lot of the challenges in their projects. So I just want to thank the panelists and our audience for engaging in this conversation, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.